Critical Conversations, episode 12. It's good to have you back. My name is Sam Castles, and with my co-host Jared Bessie, as always.
Hello, everyone.
Good to have you back. Today is not October.
October, whoa!
Today is November 9th. Yeah, if we were claiming we filmed this in October, you would have questions for us.
Yeah, lots of questions. Although it would be pretty cool because we know exactly what happened. So
Exactly. Or as close as anyone can say they know at this point.
Right, true.
Just kidding. It should be pretty shut, but that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about election results. So this is filmed 6 days after the election.
Yeah, almost a week after the election. We were
then,
going to record on Friday, and we had some technical difficulties.
True.
So that didn't end up happening, but I think it worked out because we officially had a race called on Saturday for Joe Biden. And so we can now kind of dig into kind of more of what actually happened as opposed to being like, well, we're pretty sure this is what's going to happen. But not
right. Yeah, it was like Groundhog Day for a little bit there. I was like, go to bed, not called. Maybe called by lunch. Nope. Maybe tonight while I'm asleep. Nope.
Yeah, we went up and like, oh, maybe. I was driving to San Antonio and then I got a bunch of texts and I was like, oh, I wonder what this is. Oh, yeah.
Yep. So, yeah, crazy couple of days. Hope everyone got some sleep if you were following it. Didn't pay too much attention. But,
it was like Wednesday or Thursday, I think I was like, just kind of didn't check much at all.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, okay, I gave it, Tuesday talking about it all day, Wednesday all day, like maybe it's called the day after, and then Thursday I was like, all right, it's probably not going to be till Friday or Saturday. So
yeah, what a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So we did go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so we did a bit of a pre-election episode. We kind of gave some predictions, some scenarios, and for a minute there, it was looking like best case scenario for Trump, which we knew was a bit of a long shot, but we thought for a minute, okay, best case scenario, he's actually winning Florida, winning North Carolina, winning Georgia, and then the mail-in ballots started to come in, and we saw it was back to still a good performance for Trump and the GOP overall. We'll get into the weeds here in a second, but ended up not being as crazy good.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Election night was pretty exciting, even though like we didn't know who won.
Right.
Because I feel like we were expecting, or at least I was more likely expecting a Biden decisive victory than anything else.
Right.
So when the night opened up and it was like, okay, Biden has a slight lead, like that was kind of expected because they count in, early voting first. But then, an hour in or so, it was like Florida was called pretty quick, or at least was pretty quick. East Coast.
Right.
Which was the mail-in ballots, and the Hispanic turnout there was huge.
Yeah.
Which probably the socialism messaging from the Trump campaign as framing Kamala and Biden as such a strong socialist, whatever.
Yeah.
Hit home with a lot of Hispanics that have come from more socialist-leaning countries in South America that live in Florida, and that I think was true across the states, but specifically that made a difference in Florida. Anyway, it was really interesting. Like Trump was looking pretty good, but then the mail-in ballots hit the next morning, which was kind of what I talked about in my prediction. It was like, we'd kind of have like a pendulum. We'd go one way and then go back towards Biden. I just didn't realize it would swing so in favor of Trump on election night. It
was crazy. But before I flashed the map, I want to show this cool. I was watching the betting odds like really closely, and I'll go ahead and share my screen. But these are a little hard to understand. Let me figure out.
Break them down for me because I'm not sure.
Yeah, they're a little confusing. So now I'm trying to remember what day is this. This is odds of. This is like the day of the election. So,
is this the 7th?
Which way is this flowing? So this is where we start. This is 7:30 on November 6th. which was election day, right? No.
Election
That's Friday.
3rd.
All right, I didn't have this queued up. This was a last second thing.
No, you're good.
Okay, hang on, guys. Well, this isn't the one I wanted.
Okay, but yeah.
But basically, throughout the day, Trump was supposed to have like a 30%. Let me see if I can look up there's another site that was doing a better job.
The 2024 odds are already out. That's what Google said.
Oh boy. Wow. Look at that.
Start preparing for next time, guys.
Seriously.
So exciting.
Okay. Well, this is leading up. Oh my goodness.
Oh, we're gonna have to pay. Oh,
no. We just have to allow the ads. But I'm pretty sure I don't even have ad block on this. Anyway, you can kind of see from here. Basically, the betting odds for Trump were really tight back in September, and then it was sort of holding steady at about 30% chances going into the election.
Right.
And then he started performing really well, and things got to like 50% during the election night.
Which is crazy.
Go ahead.
It's just crazy in general because it was like, 10% in some places and, 30 at the highest in others.
Right. Yeah. So I think the betting odds were always a little bit more favorable than the polls themselves, because I think the people who were betting were like accounting for the polls, but also had their reasons to doubt them and things like this. So it actually got to where during the night when Trump was looking at his best, it looked like he was going to win Wisconsin and Michigan, the betting odds were like 70, 80% for Trump. And at that point, I was like, wow, this is it. Like, he's probably going to pull it through, and the polls are never going to recover. And then slowly things started to tip back towards Biden. I remember going to bed really, really, really late on Tuesday because I stayed up for a long time, and then I went to bed, and then Catherine was not feeling well. So she was awake, and then we just stayed up for a little bit. She had like some crackers, took some Tylenol or something. Dang. And then by the time I was actually like in bed, it was 4 a.m.
Oh my gosh, dude.
I was I made it way too late.
I made it to 1:30 Central Time.
Yeah, 1:30 Central.
Which I watched Trump's speech.
Right.
Which I was watching on NBC is one of my favorite parts of election night. I was watching on NBC, and because I was just like, because I just gotten home from my watch party and I was just Googling it. And midway through Trump's speech, they're like, hold on for a sec. We'll come back to the speech here in a bit, but first we're going to show you what the actual polls say. And like, you just start like re-explaining what Trump is saying to make sure that you're not like lost. And I was like, what? I want to listen to the speech. What are you doing?
Yeah,
anyway,
there's been a lot of that lately. But it was at some point. Right. It was at some point between like 4 a.m. and when I woke up around like 7 and then slept a little bit more till 8 that there was a big shift, and the odds came back down, and the ballots were coming in heavy for Biden and those mail-in ballots, right, in the swing states. And then I was like, oh, back to being even. And then as the days ticked on, it just went more and more to Biden, and it got crazy. I mean, I was tracking a lot of people who were looking at the exact counties we were waiting on, and which counties were pro-Trump and which counties were pro-Biden or pro-Hillary, I guess, in 2016, and how the polls have been. And it was just this huge, like, poor journalists, poor guys working the maps. Like, I know the guys on Fox and CNN that were, like, getting the updates from the teams and regulating the maps and doing all the reading. I had, like, 6 hours over 3 days of sleep.
I was like, they had to have been on constantly for, they're still on. Like, it's not done.
Right, yeah. I don't know how their brains, like, held up.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So, very interesting. I'm going to flash up the map. I probably should have done it earlier. We've been sort of just referring to it, but here it is. So, this is New York Times. It's officially been called for Biden as we have,
which pretty much every major news source has called the election at this point.
Yes.
So it's
the only one who hasn't yet is Real Clear Politics. As far as I can tell, they still have Pennsylvania as a toss-up, but it sure seems over.
Yes,
sure seems over.
And I mean, Biden's probably gonna take North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona too.
So, you think he's going to take North Carolina?
Yeah, maybe not North Carolina, but
North Carolina, I think Trump will hold.
Yeah, definitely Georgia and Arizona, though.
Let me look at because I know this site had like betting odds per. See, they still have 95% chance for a Republican, but Pennsylvania is 81%, Georgia 78%.
Yeah,
these are just betting odds, so it could be even more. But that's why like Trump is. Some people still think he can win. He's still at like 13%, but through the.
But again, I think that's mostly, we were talking about this before the show, it's based on, how people are betting, and there are enough people out there that are like, yeah, it's still going to be overturned in the courts, so we're going to
exactly
get in while the getting's good, but they're going
to. So while it's still not technically over, it does look very, very dire for Trump. I think if I had to give him a percent chance of winning, it would be like 5% maybe. That's generous.
Yeah, that's generous. I think. I'm pretty confident in saying Biden's got the win. I mean, like, you even just look at. I mean, obviously the popular vote isn't everything because we have an electoral college, but I mean it's over 5 million more. So, or a little less than 5 million, but yeah, it's
3%, right?
A significant margin of people voted for Biden over Trump.
Did you see there was 538 did one where it was like, if Biden wins by 4% of the popular vote, his odds of winning electoral college are this. If he wins by 3%, it's this.
That was like a week before the election.
Yeah,
that was an interesting article for sure.
And I want to say Biden winning by 3% only gave him like a 50% chance to win the election or something around there. Like 3% was not great for Biden.
Right.
Just because of the way the electoral college is structured. Like California, I mean, look at the popular vote in California. That's an extra 5 million right there.
Yep.
So, so he needed a resounding win in the popular vote for it to not be close, basically.
Yeah, and I was reading 538 published an article yesterday that was like talking about the polls and like how big Biden actually won, and it was pretty significant that the margin of error was 3 or 4%, and that's about what we saw nationally. In certain states, it was not the case.
Right.
They were more wrong in Florida than they thought, more wrong in some of these other states.
Yeah.
Favor Trump, but nationally, it ended up being within the margin of error, so the polls didn't get it as wrong as we thought on election night.
Right. But I do think it's fair to say the polls were not great again. They seem to all fail in the same direction, where they underestimate Trump voters.
Yes. Which I think,
or GOP in general. You see this in House and Senate as well.
Yeah, no, as we go into the House and Senate next, I think that's even more interesting with the polls getting, because at the end of the day, it may be that the national election is pretty close to what they thought it was going to be. But yeah, the House and the Senate is definitely interesting.
Yeah.
We'll be covering hopefully the rest of like the analysis based on why the polls could have been as wrong as they were.
Yeah. We won't get too in the weeds today, probably.
No, probably not today. Well, we still don't know a lot of info, so.
Right, a lot outstanding.
Yep.
Yeah,
let's talk about the Senate.
Yeah, this is the Senate map. The Democrats were projected to take the Senate. It was supposed to be like 51, 52 seats to the Democrats. So
close. And it was never as confident as people were much more confident on Biden than they were on taking the Senate. It was like, this is possible, especially if we see a big blue wave, which could happen.
Right.
But it was never like super likely. And
So go ahead.
Oh, I was like, and so it looks like Republicans are going to maintain hold of the Senate.
Yeah, so it's important to know that there are still two races there are technically four races that have not been called. North Carolina, which is looking like it should go to the Republican.
They have about, 1 million more or 100,000 more? Yeah.
Yep, about 100,000 more. And that should be pretty okay. It's definitely, it hasn't been called, so that's worth saying. And then Alaska, they're counting at a snail's pace, like they're making Nevada look like Sonic the Hedgehog.
So, which is to be expected. We talked about this last time. I think we were looking at Alaska votes. It's like they count for like 17 days because of so many mail-in ballots in rural areas. And
and they have some other rules that make it difficult to count, I think. It's like a perfect storm for them to go at snail's pace.
Yep.
But that should be a call for the Republican candidate, Dan Sullivan. Right. So assuming that the Republicans lock up NC and Alaska, that will put them at 50. But Georgia is already, they're going to have 2 runoff elections for the Senate. So I wonder if I could, let's see. I guess, so there's this runoff.
Yeah, Purdue versus Ossoff.
Awesome. And then there's the second one, which is, so this one had 2 Republicans, like very strange looking race.
Interesting that, I mean, if Doug Collins and Kelly combine their votes, like they would, beat the Democrat pretty soundly. But
yeah, it's pretty strange because I mean, this would be what, like 46 almost, and then this would be 40, pick up a couple extra, 45. Like it's gonna be close still.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So these are
probably one will win each one. That is based on these projections.
Right.
It looks like Purdue will win, and then the Democrat will win in the other seat. But what would be really interesting is if the Democrats take both of them, and we have a 50-50 tied Senate, which would be wild, and that intrigues me to no end. So
right, yeah, that would be the most fascinating scenario to resolve,
especially for a political scientist. Like, why not give something else to us in 2020, like a completely split Senate?
Yeah. So the runoff is on January 5th, which
okay, so it's still a little ways away.
Still a ways away, interestingly enough. And let me go back to the Senate map. But yeah, so there's time for that to change. Like those 2 runoffs are going to be, like you just said, incredibly important because there's going to be a ton of money poured into it. Those last 2 votes are important. Not just because like a lot of votes do come down to like all 51 Republicans or whatever against 49 Democrats, but it controls who the Senate Majority Leader is, and and in the case of a tie in the Senate, the Vice President votes, which is looking like it's going to be Kamala Harris, who's obviously a Democrat and has been senator and voted incredibly with the Democrats. So those 2 seats are going to be incredibly important, and there's going to be so much money torn into that.
Yeah. And so if you live in Georgia, go vote.
Or worst case scenario, you don't live in Georgia, you're not registered in Georgia, but you have a Georgia phone number, and you get called 5 times a day for the next 2 months because everyone thinks you're going.
Who has a Georgia phone number? That's incredible. But yes.
that would be sad if you did.
That would be very sad.
Because you're going to get a lot of calls because your vote is going to matter.
Very much so.
Oh man. So the Republicans performed better than expected on the polls. These were projected to be the toss-ups. The 2 in Georgia, those are obviously still toss-ups. But the rest of the toss-ups went Republican. Iowa, Maine. So this is Susan Collins' race. She was projected to narrowly lose, I think, and she won resoundingly.
Yeah, I was just reading about her, and I was telling you, like, so Collins is the only senator who won her state while her state lost to Biden, or also voted Biden. So that means in her district, in her area, like the people split their ticket. They voted for Biden, but they also voted for her. So that's pretty interesting. That's the only Senate race where that was the case.
Right. So we can see based off of the polling here, Democrats expected to win narrowly. Pretty true. A couple very close ones. Colorado not as close. Republicans expected to win narrowly. Look at these crushing results.
Much more substantial.
Plus 20, plus 30 is not called yet, but that'll go.
That's awesome.
Plus 12, plus 20, plus, like, these are huge margins. And even for the expected to win easily, and like some of the Democrat ones were much closer than they should have been.
New Mexico
so the
polling was super close.
Polling was just way off, or not. I don't know. I shouldn't say way off until it's decided, but we're going to see the same story in the Senate, the same story in presidential, same story in the House. But yeah, this is obviously huge for the Republicans, and obviously Georgia matters. But even if it's 50-50, there's a couple senators that are Republicans that will sometimes vote Democrat. Some Democrat senators. So we were talking about Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who
their votes already matter so much, and if we do have a real 50-50 split, they're going to be like the people to watch for, right? Like they're going to matter
absolutely
a lot. You have pulled up Joe Manchin, like they're going to matter. So
I'll go to the House. Yeah, this is the map. It's a little bit harder to understand the map visually because it's all over the place, but the Democrats had control ahead of time. They were extremely likely to keep it. I mean, the odds of the Republicans taking the House were like less than 1%.
Super low. Yeah, super low.
They would have had to win like every toss-up and then a bunch of one-second Democrats.
Which they're still not going to do. But what is interesting
still not going to do
is how close everything was. You look at this, like the toss-up districts, Republicans have won every single one called. And
basically, yeah.
They've flipped
all the ones called.
All the ones called so far. And it looks like there's 2 or 3 that could go Democrat. But they also flipped 5 or 8 different seats that were
the Democrats.
Had and then the Democrats flipped 3 seats. So it ended up being a net of 5, which is really crazy when they considered that they didn't think they'd win any. I don't think. Nothing I was reading was like, they're gonna win 5 more seats in the House.
Pretty unbelievable.
They may win even more than that. So
yeah, I mean, some of these they're not called yet, but like all these New York districts, unless the mail-in voting that comes in now is extremely for Biden, like we've sort of talked about.
Right. For the Democrats in this case, yeah.
Right, yeah, sorry. But it doesn't look good for the Democrats at all.
No, yeah, it's really, really interesting. So
yeah, so again, they won't have the majority, but it's still significant because, like we said, votes are not always completely partisan, and all those votes do end up mattering. And in 2022, there's going to be a different round of House seats up for election, and if you perform well, it usually
it's usually the other party that wins at the midterm.
Right.
So odds are that the Republicans could take back the House in 2 years.
Right. So it looks like we're heading for gridlock, especially if these Georgia Senate seats break Republican. We'll still have Mitch McConnell as the Senate Majority Leader. And it is interesting to note, Biden has always fancied himself as a moderate, someone who likes to work with Republicans to get things done.
Yep, he said that many times throughout the campaign. He's
right.
So yeah, that is going to matter because he's going to have to make deals and going to have to work with Republicans more than we thought he might have to.
Exactly.
So
right, and we remember that a lot of the right strategy was to paint Joe Biden as a socialist, paint him as someone who's going to be a lot more left-leaning. But if he has no Senate to work with, the courts are also stacked more conservative these days.
Yeah, all the conservative judges. Yep.
Yeah, it's looking like it could be a pretty quiet 2 years, and then obviously it will change up in 2022.
Which
potentially
may not be the worst thing for Americans' political state right now.
Right. Yeah. So it's definitely, I mean, we had talked about this last week. There is a scenario where Biden performs exactly as he polls. He wins, 350 electoral votes or whatever. Mm-hmm. They take the House, they take the Senate, and that's when it could have been like panic time for the Republicans, because anything the Democrats wanted to do, they could do pretty easily. I mean, maybe having to deal with the courts, but there's always stacking the courts and all of that. But it looks like it's all about to be a moot point.
Which is now looking like a really smart move for Senate Republicans to have voted on Amy Coney Barrett.
Right.
Because now it's like, okay, they can't stack the courts for at least 2 years probably, and we got our justice through. So yeah, that's really interesting.
Yes. Yep. Other than that, I think there's a couple interesting things to look at. I would check out some of the ballot measures that were passed.
Yeah, there's some really interesting things passed in the last, these are measures that constituents vote on directly as opposed to being a representative voting on them. My most interesting one is it's Oregon basically legalized all drugs, or decriminalized all drugs, like all of them.
Yeah, so it's really interesting.
And like you can have heroin and you can have cocaine and you can have meth as long as
I don't think meth. Oh yeah, it is meth.
No, it's meth too. As long as you're not selling it, as long as you're not buying it, you're okay. Which,
yeah,
all right, 55% of the vote. So almost 60, only
really
56%. Anyway, that's
really interesting. Yeah, so you make a good point. It's not legalization; it's decriminalization, right?
Yeah,
You're
so like
still illegal.
it's not like Colorado and weed. It's not like legalization. You can do it. You will not be, thrown in jail or locked up for doing that. So it'll be really interesting to watch over the next couple of years what that actually looks like. So
yeah, so the actual. Well, I wish I could find the text. I wish I had it up in front of me.
Oh, like what the
yeah, because if I remember correctly, let's see. It's basically like if you get caught with a small amount, an amount that makes it sure that you weren't selling it or
right. You're not like clearly a dealer.
Right. Then you can get fined. Is it $100? It's something small.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah, here it is. Instead of going to trial and facing possible jail time, a person will have the option of paying $100 fine or attending new addiction recovery centers
funded by marijuana.
Yeah, so which is super interesting to me because I wonder if there's any like fine print here, because if I'm rich, I don't care about a $100 fine.
Yeah, $100, especially if you're paying for the drugs that cost a lot of money.
Right. And like, does it go up after the 5th offense, after the 12th offense? Like,
I don't know. Keep paying $100 and not worry about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll figure out exactly how they're going to do this, but obviously, yeah, or you don't even have to pay it. You would just have to go to basically state-funded rehab. But yeah, this is huge. Like, is there anywhere in the world like this? Like,
probably some European
country. That's a good question I just thought of. Where is cocaine legal in the world?
Well, that's different from.
That's true. Decriminalized.
But legal medically in Australia. Who knew?
Ayo. Cocaine? What is medical cocaine? That's so wild.
I don't know.
So there are. Looks like there's
decriminalized in Bolivia. It's legal in Colombia.
Wow, 1 gram. That's so funny.
I wonder where.
Okay, so it has been unenforced in the Netherlands. There's always fine print with these. I feel like these Wikipedia lists, but like legal medically interesting in the U.S. I didn't know that.
Anyway,
yeah.
Interesting.
So definitely in the minority still.
Yep.
But it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple other ballot ones that are sort of interesting. Oregon's definitely the most interesting.
Well, one I think is worth, or some I think are worth mentioning are the California initiatives. So there was one, Proposition 22, which was basically about Uber Eats and DoorDash and those kinds of places, talking about
just Uber, right?
Or just I guess just Uber, yeah. Can these drivers be considered employees so that they can be, get all the benefits that comes with employees, or can they stay as what the companies want them to stay as independent contractors, so they don't have to provide benefits and they can just, pay them a flat fee. And they voted that they would not be employees, that they would stay independent contractors with pretty significant difference. Over 2 million people more voted on that. So anyway, pretty interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying that all the other California propositions that were also interesting. There was one for, I forget the other ones now. I think there was an abortion one. I think there was one for, it was affirmative action was the other big one. To like there was a ballot or a measure to get rid of affirmative action, and they said to like re-implement affirmative action, and they said no, not to re-implement it. So affirmative action will not be in government. So basically, a lot of these more liberal initiatives that you think would happen in California didn't pass. Which historically, California used to be pretty red. So I guess.
Yeah. What do you think's going on with that?
I guess it's just a holdover from that era. / people don't know as much as we think they know. And so when they see I
think that's the big one.
Right. They're like, oh, I don't want to vote for Trump or, the Republicans. But then they see these initiatives and they're like, oh, well, I want that, or that doesn't seem right. They don't actually vote on the issues as much as they voted on the person.
Right. So. It's easy to vote R versus D, but these ballots, they aren't listed like this is the Republican way, this is the Democrat way.
Right.
You have to go and figure out. Yeah, you have to go and figure out which way. And it's actually interesting. So I vote in Virginia now. I'm legally registered in Virginia. And we had one that was basically like the way it is now, the governor and his team decides the jurisdictions for like voting. So like they draw the lines for the districts.
Right.
But the proposition was now they have to appoint a committee out of like 4 or 6.
So it's like getting rid of gerrymandering, right? That's
like evenly split.
Okay.
Well, that's what you would think, but the Democrats were running their ads saying that you should vote no because the committee would be gerrymandering, where it's like both sides were saying the other side was gerrymandering.
Right. Is the government gerrymandering, or is this, committee gerrymandering?
Is this committee gerrymandering? Yeah. So it was like, it's one of these very like, oh, isn't that so American politics, where like we're both just calling it, that's the bad thing. Like no one actually looks into it or whatever. But it is funny because like, I guess technically they're both gerrymandering if gerrymandering means drawing the districts, like, but I'm pretty sure gerrymandering means like entails having it done unfairly or something, or
gerrymandering, I think, if I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it means that when the people elected redraw the districts so that they are in favor to be re-voted in, right? So it's the idea of like, oh, I got elected in my town, I'm gonna and so now I have the power to redraw the districts, so I'm gonna draw in the way that favors me the most so that I can get reelected.
Right.
Because I could also draw them this way, and then I would be unfavored. So I think that's the idea of gerrymandering. So if you think an outside committee would prevent that because they're not elected, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Both sides were saying the other side was gerrymandering, and like you can get into the weeds if you want to look it up, but I thought it was funny.
Yeah,
but it did pass that the committee would do both of them.
That's
even though like
I don't like gerrymandering, so check that out.
Yeah. I mean, no one does, but it's a matter of what you call gerrymandering, I guess.
There.
Pretty funny. So there's some ballot measures. Feel free to check those out. Those are some of the interesting ones, I think. There's also exit polling for 2020. And if you don't know what exit polling is, it's basically they have people camped out outside of the ballots to ask people questions as they come out from voting and get more. Because when you vote, you don't write down, this is my race, this is my sexual orientation, this is my age, this is what I do for a living, how much money I make. They ask a bunch more interesting questions that obviously people can opt into, and they don't have to fill out these things, but they ask things more along the lines of like, like I just said, your income, your race. They might ask what your religious beliefs are. Are you military? How do you identify politically? All of these things. Which qualities matter more in a president? So I'll just show the NYT. But
yeah, and just before we look at these,
go
I think
ahead.
definitely worth looking at because a lot of it's really interesting. Exit polling in general is never like the most, like secure because it's often like, the people you don't know ever who's going to vote in person. And this year, I think it's going to be especially skewed because of so many mail-in ballots, right? So we're going to see more Republicans voting or answering these things. So if that seems like they're a little skewed that way, they might be because more Democrats were voting in mail-in ballots, which obviously they don't get lumped in exit polls because there's no exit polls for them. So that's definitely worth noting that this year they might be a little more squirrely and we won't have our full data for a while.
Exactly.
But some of this is still it's still worth looking at, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Like we know stuff about, like I mentioned earlier, the Hispanics in Florida, like that comes from exit polling.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I think you make a great point. It's useful to a degree, but we have to remember, like, this is not everyone who voted. These are just some people. So again, it's back to polling, and we know kind of how that story goes. And good exit pollers will account and do the math to figure out which groups are going to be overrepresented at the polls. But every time you have to account for that, your accuracy is going to go down a little bit. And if you do that enough times, and like you said with mail-ins, and they even say here on New York Times, like, these polls are not precise enough to distinguish between like 53% support and 50% support. But I think it's interesting to look at the 2020 exit polls and then compare them to like 2016 exit polls and try to figure out which candidates overperformed in areas that they didn't in the past, and weigh all of that. But it's still a bit early, but I still think some of it is interesting to look at.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's a little bit like comparing the two. And
yeah, I mean, Trump, wins men and more white voters. Women and minorities are more likely to vote for Biden. That's maintained pretty clear. Hispanic vote actually swung towards Trump more than it did in 2016, so that was interesting.
Yeah, he did a lot better with minorities, I think, than he did in 2016.
Yeah, at least which is, you'd feel like it'd be the opposite based on the last 4 years, but I guess people are just I don't know. It's become such white noise at this point.
Yeah, nice pun. No, I think it'll be more interesting to look at as the next week goes, or the coming weeks, really, when the ballots are finally done being counted. We get more reliable exit polling data, figure out exactly how it broke. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in weeks to come.
Yeah.
All
right, so
interesting.
The last thing I think we should talk about is where we're at now and what the heck's going on. So if you've been on Twitter, which I never recommend, you will notice that Trump has not conceded the election, and he's been very clear about that he won the election, actually, and that this is not over. So I just wanted to, bring this up, and I've had some different people text me like, oh, what do you think about the fraud and like all these different claims? And I'm very tired of okay, let's see if I can break down my thoughts best I can. So basically, because we had that big swing towards Trump at the beginning of the night, right, and then the big swing back in the swing states, we were always going to see a disconnect between people that didn't like mail-in ballots, right? Because majority of these mail-in ballots are voting Democrat. Trump directly told his supporters to not vote that way as much, and Biden told his supporters vote however you wish, and so that was always going to be skewed. This kind of created the perfect storm, especially because Trump outperformed what people thought he was going to perform, for people to say, well, there clearly must be fraud or some tampering or something, and that Trump actually did win, and these mail-in ballots shouldn't be trusted. So there was calls to stop the vote in Pennsylvania, whatever. But it was always kind of known these votes were going to swing that way, and so it's more concerning to me that's like, okay, they're going to just call this or just want to stop the vote just because they don't like what's coming in. But yeah, anyway, so this continues to be an issue, and we're going to be talking about this for a while, I think, which it's worth looking into if there are claims. Like I totally get that. There's always election fraud. I mean, you can go on to Heritage Foundation's like tracker, and they have like tracked all the different election fraud of the last 10, 15 years. And it's definitely out there. Like people want to cheat to get the people that they won to win. But right now I'm not seeing any evidence of widespread fraud. We were talking a bit before the show, is like, if we were going to see widespread fraud, we were going to see it like pretty widespread. We've got the country's top minds looking into these things, and I'm not seeing any sway one way or another. I think a way that I've looked at it that is helpful for me when you're hearing all these conflicting voices, like clearly it's this and clearly it's this, I'm looking at who's saying these things, because I think people's voices matter. And the people that I'm seeing saying that there's election fraud, or saying that it's worth like letting the judicial process play out. Like I've seen Ted Cruz be like, let's just let it play, let it go, which is true. I think we should do that. But it's very kind of skewed, like hoping for one favorable decision or other, right? Are these like big Trump supporters. And then everyone else is saying that it's not that case, including some Trump supporters that are saying there's not a lot of election fraud. And so when I see that kind of like the middle vote, or the middle, like people that are more like centric are like clearly siding one way, that I think makes a difference.
Yeah.
At least looking at.
Yep.
And I think
have a wise take.
Yeah, I think it's worth looking at, international leaders, other national leaders. George Bush is like, hey, Biden won. I think his statement's really worth reading. I miss the leadership of Bush and the way he was so eloquent, and I like the way he speaks. So worth looking at his statement. A lot of other international figureheads who were, have been Trump fans, like Netanyahu and like Angela Merkel, like a lot of these different people that were more, favorable towards Trump have been like congratulated Biden. And so I think it's pretty one-sided what I've seen. I've seen lots of Facebook posts and Twitter things that are like, if you think there's no fraud, like you need to wake up and you're just living under a rock and you clearly love Biden so much you're willing to overlook things. There's a lot of people that don't like Biden very much and that didn't want him to win that are still like, yeah, I'm not really seeing much fraud.
Right.
And I think it's kind of ridiculous to say otherwise. So that's my hot take, and I had to rant a little bit. So.
No, I appreciate it. I think that's a great take. I'm pretty much with you. I think there's almost no way there's significant enough election fraud to turn over a state, let alone the 4 or 5 that Trump lost, and he's going to need 2 or 3 of those to break.
Right.
So
it's not just like, if you just got Pennsylvania, if it was like Pennsylvania, and there was clearly some tampering there because of, like boarded up walls, there's all these things you see. It's like, okay, well, even if he won that, he didn't win here and here and here. Right. So it would have to be pretty widespread at this point.
Right. Which I highly doubt that's the case. However, I do think it does need to be looked into. We should obviously always be diligent. Election integrity is very important, and it does need to be examined. And obviously, this is such an extenuating circumstance. I mean, we have a pandemic that caused us to change the rules to the election, like in the months or even weeks leading up to the election. There were court rulings in Pennsylvania that came very close to the day of the election, and because of all of that, I think we do need to look into it. I hope that once this pandemic goes away, we don't have this mail-in ballot if you feel like it. Like, I understand it's a pandemic, people need to be able to vote safely, because not allowing it is also a threat to the election, I think. Because you're going to start seeing younger people show up more instead of older because they're more at risk. And
you've skewed your.
So, but I hope it never has to happen like this again, because it does tend towards uncertainty and not knowing for sure. So I think it's good that they invest all of this energy into figuring it out. I hope people will at least stay open-minded. I mean,
right. And for the people that are saying like, well, so we shouldn't do any like look into it or like no recounts, like the recount votes are set, it's a legal precedent. It's like if it's within this thing, the opposing candidate can legally request a recount. So like that's fine. Like go for it. Like that happens almost every election.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's just such a perfect storm. I mean, we have seen the contention over mail-in ballots and election fraud. Just the talking points have been there since really early. I mean, Trump has been sowing the seeds of there could be fraud. You shouldn't vote by mail because they're going to steal it by mail. You should vote in person. All of this, and then on the left, I mean, especially big tech. Like every time someone says, "Oh, maybe mail-in ballots are more prone to fraud," there's immediately a tag saying, "No proof." There's never been
it's true.
And there's a lot of things that have been removed for being false. Probably most of them are true, but when you start lining up this idea of fraud happening was struck down before it could even get debated. They're removing a lot of information instead of potentially just letting it go out and then fighting it with true information. And
speaking of all that, I've seen even among my non-political friends a huge swing of Parler increase talk. Parler is like the new conservative Twitter. I think we may have talked about it.
I mean, they would never say they're conservative. They would say they're bias-free or whatever.
Yeah, but it's like mostly conservatives on the platform. Even a couple months ago, I think one of the founder was like, "I will pay a liberal to get on here." But so I think there's a lot of mistrust of like big tech, and so they wanting to go to a new platform.
Right. So people don't trust the media. People don't trust big tech. The seeds of this have been sown for forever. Trump is. He's not saying maybe we should look into this and see if there's fraud. He's saying 100% there is fraud, which is definitely not good for the unity of the country. But I understand it from a strategy of trying to win at all costs. Like you have to throw this the way you're throwing it. But if I were president or advising him, I would not say it's not worth it. Be reasonable and all of this.
Yeah.
Let's examine it. Like Ted Cruz is saying, let's examine it. Let's let it play out.
Yeah.
But
go
ahead.
Oh yeah, just the other thing that's I think tied up into this is the distrust of media. I've seen several different statements this year, particularly of being okay, the media's called the election, but that means nothing because the election's not called yet. And it's yes, that is true because the Electoral College has not voted yet. So technically Biden is not president-elect yet because the Electoral College has not voted. But how the Electoral College works is that the people vote, and then the Electoral College vote based on what people vote. We know what the people voted, so we will know what the Electoral College is going to vote. So it's a projection of that. So to say that the media is lying to you and saying that's president-elect, I saw a poll on Twitter that Dave Rubin that was did you know that it's not president-elect right now? It's what? That doesn't help. That doesn't mean anything, right? It's just sowing disunity, and I'm tired of it. So.
Yeah. I totally get it. I do think though, a lot of it's brought on itself, with Twitter, when Trump was saying really early on, we're gonna win. I'm confident we're gonna win. We frankly already won. Twitter was flagging, oh, this has not been called yet. But basically at the same time, Joe Biden's lawyer was we're gonna win. We're confident we're gonna win. And Twitter was not flagging that. Biden would never get a Twitter tag in a million years, no matter what he said.
There's definitely some of that out there for sure. I don't want to discount any of that either.
Right. So I just think it's just all-time high for perfect storm for this to happen. But personally, we've been laughing and joking about this. I hope you guys can too. I don't think there's need to panic on the left. I don't think there's need to panic for the right. This is going to go through the legal system. Yep. Whatever you may think about the Supreme Court and the judges in place, I'm probably biased, but I have full confidence in them to make the right decision. I've seen them say many a times, when you're a Supreme Court judge, your job is not to put in your own preferences, to be objective and apply the law. And I've seen them rule on things that they personally disagree with because they know that the law is what it is. And I I have faith that it's going to get worked out, and I think Trump will probably not make any headway in the Supreme Court, and you guys will see.
Did you see SCOTUS Blog's tweet like the day after the election? They were like, there is literally 0% chance that at this point that the Supreme Court will overturn the election results. Like they were like, they're the de facto, experts on the Supreme Court.
Right.
And if they're saying that they're like Supreme Court, even if all the people that were Trump appointees, it's like they're not gonna. If there's no like true fraud, like they're not gonna overturn anything. They're not gonna vote just because.
Yeah. And
appointed them. They're gonna be on there for 40 years. Like they have no reason to, risk that the court's approval based on next 4 years of the president.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen a lot of claims, but I haven't yet to see any smoking guns.
Yeah.
And, if we saw a couple things that look promising, we'd be like, oh, maybe they will rule. But right now it's looking like a whole lot of nothing. So we'll see. I'm sure, like we talked about, there's going to be instances where things were not done correctly. And
there's going to be fraud. There's going to be mistakes. There's, human error in elections when, hundreds of millions of people are voting. It's like,
right.
There's going to be some of that. So,
yeah. But I hope it's all done soon, Jared. That's what I want.
Yes. Hopefully by January it'll finally be wrapped up. So.
Yeah. Yep. Any closing thoughts for us?
I think that's about it. I think it's been fun to watch, like, as being very trying to be as objective as I can, just looking at this from a historical and like political perspective, and analyzing it in that way has been fun. And it's a crazy time in history, and we're gonna be talking about this election for probably decades, and cool that we gotta be a part of it at least.
Yeah,
it happens.
Absolutely. So. Cool. Any recommendations before I intro us out?
Did have a recommendation, and then I forgot it. So let me see. Hold on.
Let me see. I'm trying to remember if I have anything on the fly.
No, I had. Well, okay.
Mandalorian season.
Yeah, Mandalorian season's been pretty good. I've been watching The Queen's Gambit, based on your recommendation last week. So
attaboy.
That's been really fun. No, I will recommend an author that I really like. His name is Brandon Sanderson. He is a fantasy author. He is releasing the fourth book in his like big master epic, which is going to eventually be 10 of them, and he releases one every 3 or 4 years. And that comes out next week. So that's kind of, I just finished the first book in that series. I never read them before. It's the Stormlight Archive. But my favorite series, one of my favorite series of all times he wrote is called the Mistborn Trilogy. And I've recommended it to several people who are not fantasy fans, and everyone loved it. Everyone loves it. It's very good. So yeah, Brandon Sanderson, he's great.
Nice. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thanks for watching, guys. My voice just cracked.
I was impressed. I almost said something and you said it.
That doesn't happen very often anymore. Take it when it happens. Go ahead and like us on Facebook.
Yes.
Like us on YouTube. Like this video. Subscribe. And catch us on Spotify. And really all
Spotify,
places.
Anchor, Pocket Casts, Google Podcasts. Still not on Apple Podcasts. One day, maybe, when I get around to it.
Who's listening to Apple Podcasts?
I know. It's a horrible interface. So, and I still use it. Anyway.
Thanks for joining us. Hope you guys have a good rest of your week. And we will be back next week.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.